Hello, welcome to Is There Fudge on Mars? Today, we're going to be looking at something which I hope is going to make you think about how wonderful the world is that we live in, because we're going to be talking about wonder, the kind of things that make us go, wow, that's incredible. Oh, I wish I'd seen that before. And got the usual three of us here. There's Steve Maltz, David Jones, and myself, David Shepherd. Let's kick things off, shall we? Steve, I know you've had an interesting week and you've been having a debate with all sorts of people about what's going on with Israel and Gaza and all these kind of things. That's been monopolizing your thinking. But let's move on to something completely different. And the reason I'm saying this is, there's a verse, and I'm looking for you now to give me the quote where it's from, which talks about let us think on these things which are of good report. Now, I should have looked up the verse beforehand, but I know you know.
Philippians 4:8 is where you need to go to.
Yeah.
That's it then. Quote that to us, David. Philippians 4:8.
It's finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things.
And what's the result of doing that?
Go on.
Because it goes on, doesn't it? The verse
it says, okay. Then it says, whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. Is that what you were thinking?
I think it was, yeah.
Were you primed for that?
No, I already had it, Steve, as a preemptive strike.
Oh my goodness. You've been plotting against me because I knew nothing about that. But that's interesting because I'd had that in one of my books as the summary, living the life, all about living a good life, and that was the verses that. So
well, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because I think in the world today there is so much going on that can pull you down and make you feel depressed.
Yeah.
State of the world, all the battles going on, the people being killed, the famines, overwhelming at times. And I think it's good just to take time to reflect and think on good things.
Need to do that, because we've now got a general election on top of everything else. So let's try to deflect from all that and think of the good things.
He said immediately pulling it back into the pit.
Well, I'm saying that as a non sequitur because we're not going there. So I'm going to start things off.
Go on then. Oh, I was going to say that I'm going to have my implant for my tooth because I've lost a tooth, guys. I'm going to have an implant, but the implant is going to be put in on the 4th of July, which is election day, which is going to be exciting, isn't it?
It's not to talk politics with your dentist. You want to keep your dentist on your side. Yeah. Wonder. I'm going to have to be a bit David Jonesy here, i.e. cheesy. one word he's used to sort of define himself. No, the thing that gives me most wonder is my wife. And I'm saying that because I know she's not going to listen anyway, so I'm not going to embarrass her. But being married for 44 years now, we still surprise each other. We're both just so a bit weird and unpredictable that we still fill each other with wonder, and we don't follow normal paths in what we do. So life for me is, she's very much a big factor in the wonder of life and the wonder that someone could stay with me for so long. I mean, that's another aspect of wonder.
I'm wondering about that as well.
I know, because I'm not the easiest person, and in many ways neither is she. So I suppose that's why we get on. But and all the main things to do wonder to do with family. I think I was present at the birth of all three of my boys, and you don't get anything more for the wonder to see a birth actually happening before you, particularly your own son. And particularly the first one, because her gas and air wasn't working properly. So I actually had to be in charge of part of the equipment. I had to hold the tube in place, I think, while she was giving birth to the first one. So I was very much involved. But it's, to actually see, bear in mind that I would see the baby before she did. And to actually, to see this little being, this bloody mess, basically, but this human being, it's absolutely, there can't be more wonder, in your spirit, and actually seeing your own flesh being created in front of you. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
That's a good start, isn't it? I tell you what, though, it kind of puts the onus on David and me to say what we think of our wives. Or shall we just say ditto? I think it's easier to do that than go into detail.
I think David Jones has to,
and embarrass ourselves.
I know Joe listens to this, so.
Well, I think I've already praised my wife today, so I think, as you guys know,
once a day is enough, isn't it?
Yeah, once a day keeps the wife happy. Once a day of an apple keeps the doctor away, and all that. So, yeah, I'm currently in the Lake District, which I think I may have told you about. Again, this was a preemptive strike. I'm not meant to be here this week. I was meant to be here in a few weeks' time, but as I'm due to have an operation on my back, I've had to bring it forward a bit. So, with my wife's permission and grace and loveliness, I'm currently in the lakes again. I go home tomorrow.
Yeah.
But, we started off there talking about how depressing it is to have a general election being forced upon us yet again. And Jo this morning, where she rang me on her way to work, and we were just talking generally about the optics of yesterday and how dreadful it looked from my perspective to see the Prime Minister getting absolutely drenched.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously it just made it so much easier for the media and the newspapers today, to 10 drowning streets and all that kind of nonsense that came out. And,
I hadn't heard that. That's brilliant.
I hadn't heard that one. And then obviously you had that he really does drive me mad. That guy who's obviously shouting, stuff Brexit every few seconds outside Downing Street, and he was blasting out.
Who's that? Tony Blair
anthem. Things can only get better, which is now being transformed into things can only get wetter.
Apparently, until his speakers blew up because they got wet.
Yeah, they got too wet, didn't they? Anyway,
it's kind of ironic because things can only get better. Oh.
That's right. So I was talking to Jo about this and about the optics of it and how awful I thought it looked, and probably looked to most people. And Jo took completely the opposite view. She said, he was stood there in the pouring rain. It was like a storm lashing down on him, but he kept to his script. He tried to make it look like he was solid and dependable and reliable. And other people may have asked for an umbrella to go over his head, but he just stood there. He decided not to do it inside where it would have been easier for him. He stood outside in the pouring rain. And so my attitude of that was Jo. And she went basically on a monologue for about 20 minutes on this, on her driving. And I turned around and said, Jo, you're in the wrong job. You need to get in touch with Conservative Central Office straight away and forward as an advisor for the general election campaign for the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
So my wife can be wonderful as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I agree. I've got a match there really, because I think the thing about I love being married to Debbie because she's so different to me in every single way. And a little bit like with Steve, I just look at it in wonder that we've managed to stay married for so long. But she knows all my weaknesses. She points them out to me regularly. But she also she's very caring. She knows, that this, I was saying to Steve a little bit and David a bit earlier about the fact that I discovered that I've got sleep apnea, and she was been pushing for me to have some tests on that for some time. So yeah, I really appreciate her, and it makes such a difference. Let's move away from wives, though.
Yeah,
let's talk about something different. I'm going to throw some things in, which I'm just interested in what your reactions to these things are. But I've got a list of 856 things that give me wonder.
You've been on Google again?
No. It's about 20, I think. But I'm just going to select from them. Well, I tell you, one of them is I was in India, and I've only been to India once, and we had a journey into a village, that was completely remote. It had no electricity, and we had to drive across a dry riverbed. There was no street lights, there was no town lights. And I can remember standing there looking up at the sky and thinking, my goodness, I didn't realize what the stars look like when there's no light pollution. It was stunning, absolutely stunning. And in this country, you only see less than 1% of what the stars really look like from Earth when there's no light pollution. It's incredible. And it does make you wonder about the size of the universe, how enormous it is, that sometimes you're seeing a pinprick and somebody will tell you that pinprick is 100 million galaxies or something. Probably that's not true, but I'm exaggerating. But it's that kind of size. And then you start to think about what infinity is and the wonder of God and his creation. And I can never forget that moment. In fact, the first time I ever saw the stars like that was on the Isle of Man on a holiday when I was quite young. But then going to India, it was even better.
Well, I remember the first time I really saw the Milky Way, we were in the south of France on a family holiday. And I had my boys with me, and it's just so startling. I know David Jones is going to come onto this, because that's one of his things as well. But it's certainly, I've been into astronomy since I was a kid. Yeah, and I just remember one of the first things I wanted to save up for was a 3-inch refractor telescope as a kid. Never managed to do it. Ended up with a toy one, but at night time, we used to creep out of our houses as a kid. So I must be about 12 or 13 with my sister and the girl next door and her brother. We used to sneak out at midnight and climb onto the garage with a telescope and just look at the stars. And that was the wonderful time, you know.
Yeah.
You know what we were looking at. Saturn, we did manage to see Saturn, I think. And that the fact that you can see something that is not just a dot in the sky, but it's got something else about it.
Yes.
Just made, this sense of wonder that, this thing is millions of miles away, and yet it has a distinct look and feel to it. And
I think it's astonishing, Stephen.
Yeah.
I call it, the canopy of stars that are above our heads. Sometimes referred to as the Milky Way as the backbone of night. So it's a spine-like effect that as it arches across the sky, and the more you look into it, the more overwhelming it can seem.
Yep.
So we know that the speed of light is at 186,000 miles per second. So for people listening, that means that if we could go that fast, which we can't, but if we could, you could get to the moon and back in 3 seconds. And yet, even traveling at that speed, it would still take you over 4 years to reach the nearest star. So it can feel overwhelming, but the beauty and the majesty of it should make you feel overwhelmed. If that's not awe-inspiring, if that doesn't cause you to wonder, then I suggest you need to get out more at night.
Yeah. There's in the Psalms, it says several times, doesn't it, that the sky or the stars declare the glory of the Lord.
The heavens declare,
The heavens declare the glory of the Lord. I think that's very true.
The thing that we always look forward to, which is, I think, the beginning of the year, is when Orion comes out.
Yeah.
And that is the most amazing constellation of all. And I remember I started writing a book about it. Because at one point I was looking at, there's a lot of these theories that came out of, I think, particularly from the last century, about the gospel in the stars. And I got these books, and I was going to write one myself. And I started to write it, and then I thought, no one's going to read it. Come on. They're not ready for this yet. It's bad enough, the other stuff I write about. But certainly with Orion very much was identified with Jesus. The hunter and the belt, particularly the belt and the scabbard that comes down from it. Because when I finally saved up to buy a decent telescope, which I did, I bought a Meade, whatever it was, FX or something, and focused it on that nebula. That even in the night skies that are not very good round here with the night pollution, if you concentrate on that sort of fadey bit under the 3 stars, that's right, sort of a parallel star, you can actually see something. You can actually see this nebula, see this sort of cloudy, colourful thing. And I think if it's a case of a top 10 of wonders, that would be certainly in the top 10.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've ever seen, but see it. You can actually see it with the naked eye as a sort of a smudge, but when you actually look at it closely, it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it is wondrous, and obviously we've had more recently, which I was very fortunate to see. Joe and I went all the way over to Iceland to see the Northern Lights and didn't see them.
Oh my goodness!
And then more recently, we saw them from our own back garden when they were visible over the UK. And it was incredible. I think I sent you some pictures of it. It was absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah. Well, we missed on the Friday, so we thought we'd go out on the Saturday. And I think I've told you my adventures, what actually happened when we went out. That's not for this broadcast.
That's definitely another podcast, Steve. That one.
All right. Let me take you somewhere else. I've got some more mundane things, but they still cause me some degree of wonder. And I remember when I was a kid, I don't know if any of you had these, but you could get a 3D viewer. And the 3D viewer had little circular things with lots of pictures in that you could put in, and it would give you a 3D picture of different things. And one of the sets of pictures that I had was of the Grand Canyon. And I can remember this 3D viewer and looking at the Grand Canyon through this and just being overwhelmed by the size of it, the depth of it, how stunning the colors were on it. And I've never been there, but I'd love to go and see it. And I know now they have a walkway, don't they? A glass walkway that you can walk out over part of the canyon. I'm not sure whether I'd have the courage to do it, to be honest, but I think I'd like to have a go. But either of you been there?
My son's been a few years ago. My other son's going next year, but I've never been there. No.
So I've been fortunate enough to go twice. The first time I went with my eldest brother, and we parked the car, and we were in what's called the South Rim car park, which is probably where you get the most spectacular viewpoint from. And we could see there were trees in front, but we could clearly see there was something quite vast beyond it. And we exited the car and walked over, and literally, it is one of those few times in your life when the saying breathtaking is definitely the right word. It just takes your breath away. You don't even know what to say. What was phenomenal was we then went up in a helicopter and flew over the Grand Canyon.
Not good enough just to go and look at it. You have to go up in a helicopter. I mean, look, this David Jones person, he can beat us at everything, can't he?
No, I can't.
I mean, not only is he somebody who's has done running, and he goes and he's such a clever chap, and now he goes up in helicopters.
Well,
he probably piloted it as well.
Well, there is
undoubtedly.
I didn't pilot it, Steve, but I have piloted a plane, but that's another story. Well, I went back a few years later when Joe and I were dating before we got married, and obviously she'd never been. So we went very early in the morning, and I just said to her, look, just close your eyes and walk over with me. So she linked my arm, and we sort of stumbled over the curb and got to.
And you pushed her off.
Yeah, I pushed her off. Yeah, never seen again. Whole other story. It's given me lots of ideas for books, David. That's where my crime novels come from. So anyway, so then she opened her eyes, and Joe likewise was just completely and utterly blown away by it.
Yeah.
You can't do it justice by watching it on a TV, or even if you looked at it maybe in virtual reality now, which I guess would be the next step up from what you had there, David, as a child.
Yeah.
I still don't think it would. Nothing can obviously replicate the real thing.
Yeah. Well, that's it's been on my bucket list. That'd definitely be one of the things I'd like to go and see. A few years back, we went on a holiday to northern France and stayed with some friends in Brittany. And we went to a little coastal village, and they had I think it was the anchor. I can't remember now, but I think it was the anchor of the Torrey Canyon. And I don't know if you remember, it was either the Torrey Canyon or one of the other boats that had sunk and released all of its oil. Remember? Yeah. And it could cause devastation to the fishing and the mussel farms and all those kind of things on that north coast of Brittany. And as we went along that coast, I remember we reached some places where the cliffs were quite high, and we stood and watched the waves. And I was in awe, I suppose, of the size of the waves. And I was thinking, that like you would think about what on earth could cause a great big massive oil tanker to go aground or to sink. And you look at the waves and you think, they are stunning. I mean, the power and the force of the water with, and I mean, I'm sure there are other places in the world where it's bigger, but that was one thing that still remains with me, is looking at those waves on the Brittany coast.
That's tremendous.
Yeah. Have either of you been to Jerusalem?
Yeah.
Have they got waves there?
No, I'm just saying.
Is this a non sequitur?
No, it's not named non sequitur, because we're talking about wonder. I have to say,
They do have waves there, that they wave palm branches on Palm Sunday, David.
Ah, right. Okay. Big ones.
Anyway, following on, I first went when I was 18, no, sorry, 21, to, I was working on the kibbutz in Israel in between university and work. And we're coming up to December, and I just decided by myself to leave the kibbutz and just wander off to Jerusalem, because at that time I knew little about it. I'd just been introduced to the New Testament. I didn't really understand what was going on. I didn't really know the history. I just felt compelled to visit that one place. And I just remember the thought of actually what I saw when I first went. The first time you go there, it's absolutely astounding.
Yeah.
To actually coming into it, from the direction of the city, to actually see it, it's just like transports you back to how cities must have been in the old days. I know it's a lot different inside, but there's still so much, and that is authentically old, and the walls are still there, and it's sort of higher up, and you can see it from a distance. And that place has had a hold on me ever since.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds like a real cliche about Jerusalem, and people talk about Jerusalem, and we've got, the lots of songs about yearning for Jerusalem, and, psalms for talking about that. But it was very, very real for me.
And you get drawn back quite often.
Yeah,
because
I've been drawn back loads of times. Yeah.
You do get inspiration when you go there, don't you?
And I do get inspiration.
For your writing.
But one of the weirdest things is when I went back with my family, my family came into some money, and my mum and dad decided to book us as a massive holiday to Jerusalem and Netanya. When we went to Jerusalem, my dad, not being particularly clever at the time, booked us in on this posh hotel on a sort of a building site on the outskirts of the new city, nowhere near the real Jerusalem. And so to go into to Jerusalem itself, it was like a half an hour's journey from the hotel, and it sort of just took everything away from me.
Yeah,
about the excitement of it. And from then, and that was 1995, from then until for at least 8 years, I used to have almost nightly dreams about going to Israel, but never getting to Jerusalem, and being really upset. And I still get that now, because I've been stopped from going because of COVID, and now obviously because of the war. I hadn't been for 2 or 3 years, and I really feel it. And that place has just filled my heart with such wonder. And and I hear it from other people as well. And I've never had that about any other place.
Yeah.
There's something going on there, that there is it's a God thing, definitely.
Yeah. Something special about the place.
Yeah, it's almost like Muslims have to do this Hajj thing, to Mecca, but I'd suggest every Christian should go to Jerusalem at least once, I think, to ground them into the reality of it all.
Interesting.
There you go.
Well done. I mean, it's one of those places that I'll pull out another thing on my bucket list. Really, it's one of those places I'd love to go to. I'll let you pay for me, Steve, next time you go.
Yeah, you pay for me and I'll pay for you. Let David pay for both of us, because he just has to snap his fingers, and probably money just comes out of the sky. Helicopter.
That is so not true.
Well, we've been talking about big things here. What about smaller things that just create wonder in you?
Okay, before you do that, smaller thing. I'm sorry to butt in, but just remembering David's story about helicopter. We were away last weekend at Centre Parks with my 2-year-old grandson, and that's his first four-syllable word.
Wow.
Helicopter. Not said in that way, but a close enough approximation for you to know what you're saying. It's helicopter.
It's great, isn't it?
And there's a lot of wonder in that, seeing kids sort of just experimenting with their first words.
Yeah,
you know?
my grandson's done the same recently, and he has managed to say gang gag, which I think is granddad.
I'm Daps because Gramps is my official name apparently in my family, but none of the kids can say it. It comes out as Daps.
I'll tell you some more lovely things which I just love. They make a day really when it happens. Is I love getting into bed with clean, fresh, or new sheets.
Oh yes,
or duvet. There's something about it when they're all nice and crisp and clean, and you get into the bed and you think, "Oh, this is so nice." Am I the only one who feels that? David, do you like it as well?
I definitely feel that. And funnily enough, the accommodation currently is this lodge in a place called Haverthwaite on the southern fringes of the lakes, and it's the most comfortable bed, David, I've ever slept in my life.
Yeah,
so much so that I asked the owner for the mattress that she bought and where she bought it. So I'm going to order one because it is so unbelievably comfortable. But yeah, fresh sheets and fresh pillowcases. Yeah,
brilliant, isn't it?
Preferably Egyptian cotton.
Yeah,
so, absolutely.
So David Shepherd, isn't it you that has his and hers electric blankets?
Oh yes, yeah.
Are they monogrammed? You know?
We have it. It's amazing. I can have my side on, and Debbie can have it off, and we can set it at different settings. And I mean, we're taking it off for the summer. We don't need it now, but I mean, and I was arguing against it. I said, "No, we don't want it. We definitely don't want it." But if I was to make the room perfect, I'd have this fresh, clean sheets. But also in the morning, the smell of coffee and that first cup of coffee in the morning. Oh, it's like nectar, isn't it? I mean, when you're tired and you've just woken up and you have the coffee, the smell of the coffee. Oh, I guess you could supplement it even more with fresh bread, the smell of fresh bread.
Yeah.
This is kind of like going to heaven, really, isn't it?
It's when you get a fresh jar of coffee and you're taking the seal off for the first time.
Yes.
So the smell comes straight out.
It's wonderful. It's absolutely brilliant. It's that lovely smell.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I told you, but we've got some coffee at the moment that is, I can't remember what it's called, but it's they put a little promo thing on it which says it's ridiculously healthy coffee. And it does, because it gives you lots and lots of antioxidants which help to prevent cancer. But every time I open a packet, exactly right, Steve, the smell. I quite often go and say, "Hey, Debbie, smell this." It's funny, wonderful.
It's funny because I don't get that with tea bags. You know?
No, you don't, do you? No, it's not the same. It's not the same.
Freshly mowed grass as well in parks and things like that.
I often say
fresh grass. That's nice.
Yeah, that's lovely. I often say that, for me, it would be heaven if I had crisp, lightly toasted bread with real butter and good, strong, bitter marmalade, a nice cup of coffee, and that would be perfect for breakfast for me.
That's your idea of heaven.
Do you think we'd have that in the Lamb's, what's it, Feast of the Lamb?
Yeah.
I think you will, David, and I think people listening now are actually salivating as they're listening to you.
I'll be calling out for a McDonald's.
Steve will be having Mars bars.
Yeah. And I don't drink coffee. just because it doesn't agree with me. It doesn't agree with my stomach lining for some reason. But
But
I
you
love
like the smell.
of it. I love the smell of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. I give you another one.
On
Do you remember what happened on the 20th of July, 1969?
Yeah, the moon landing.
Hey, absolutely right. Wasn't that amazing?
Incredible. Or inspiring.
I wasn't very
surely
old.
David could have been old enough, surely, Mr.
Oh, well,
Jones.
I was 5.
Oh, 5. You
Yeah.
actually remember it as a 5-year-old?
I remember it because, as I think I may have told this story before, it was the first time my dad ever let me stay up to watch something
Oh, yeah.
late
Yeah.
with him.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. So it's not just the memory of watching it, it's the memory of actually watching it with my dad.
It's the occasion that it
Yeah.
was with
Yeah.
your dad. Yeah.
And
That
that was
makes
the ironic thing, because my mum and dad sent me next door to watch it.
Wow.
They were too busy having parties and things. They weren't interested. They just weren't interested.
Really?
Sent me next door. Yeah. I had to
Wow.
watch it next door.
I
Unbelievable.
just remember the thing about it, even now, I look at those grainy pictures and I think, you could hardly really see what was going on, could you?
No.
And it's amazing that we got the pictures in the first place. But still, that sense of a man putting his foot on the moon for the first time, it was awe-inspiring. It was amazing. And what a technological feat that was.
Yeah.
I think the only way we're going to get perhaps young people to appreciate just how awesome that was for our generation is if we see that replicated by the first person to go to Mars.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not amazing that we never progressed from moon to Mars. And that was how long ago? 30, 50 years,
ago.
50 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I still find it amazing that the power of computing that these early explorers had and the Apollo missions was less than we've got in much less than we've got in the average mobile phone now.
They actually say that the Apple mobile phone has more technology in it than the whole of the NASA project.
Stunning, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. But anyway, I remember writing about wonder and beauty and things like that when I wrote this. The Truth Is Out There, the book I wrote about 20 years ago.
Great book.
Which was quite interesting. So I was researching it, and it was like things that point you to God, just through nature, through design and miracles and such. I researched that book because I wanted to look into evolution in order to refute it. So I naturally went to the Natural History Museum. I went on the 7th of July, no, the 5th of July, 2005. Okay. Right. So I went on that particular day. I was on the train.
Was that meant to mean something?
Yeah,
it does mean something. I know what you're going to say, Steve.
It will do it. I was on the train on the District Line that went past Aldgate. If I'd been on the train afterwards, I would have been blown up.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I was actually stranded in the museum because the whole of the transport system went down. So this was 7/7. This was the English equivalent of 9/11, when we had those bombs, all King's Cross and the bus bombing and etc. But Aldgate was the one that I just missed. So when I came out of the museum, having done all my research, the streets were absolutely abandoned. Didn't know what was going on. No one was there saying anything. And I just looked in a shop window at a television, and then you could see what was going on. So I actually had to walk home from West London to East London, walk through all the points where the event had happened, to see all the roadblocks, see all the panic. It was just history just happening in front of my eyes.
Yeah.
The whole transport system had gone down. Anyway, that's not relevant, because the relevant thing that's just an aside, because
we're back to wonder.
So back to wonder, because I did a chapter on wonder, and the thing that really got me, and it's going back to astronomy again, is how an eclipse actually happens. Because an eclipse is something that isn't just sort of a thing of wonder to look at. And the thing that set me off that was remembering the eclipse that I actually saw on the 11th of August 1999, that you may all remember. I was in the Lake District, and we saw 90% of it. Even then, it was effective, and we had to use these devices to have a look at it. The thought that the only reason it happens is because the distance between the moon and the Earth is well, I've got to get this right. It looks like the moon and the sun are the same size, but obviously they're not. That's because the moon is actually exactly 400 times less than the size of the sun, the size of the moon, and the distance from the Earth is also 400 times exactly. Because of those two, because of that total coincidence, is the only reason why an eclipse happens. It seems that they're the same size because of the illusion of the distance, and that's an absolutely amazing thing. And if it had been just a few percent difference, we would never get an eclipse.
Yeah.
So for me, that's something wonderful that we take for granted, but obviously something that God had designed for us, living on this earth, to actually see something in the heavenlies. And that leads on to so many other things. And I don't know if you heard of a thing called the anthropic principle.
Go on, Steve, enlighten us.
Yeah, no, I'm sure this will become familiar. It's the principle that says that everything in Earth is as if it was all designed for our well-being.
Yeah.
From our point of view. So the fact that the moon is a certain distance from the Earth, the fact that the forces within molecules are as they are, the gravity is as it is, and all the constants, all the mathematical constants in nature are exactly right. If any of them had been any slightly different, there'd be no life on Earth.
Yeah.
Life on Earth depends on so many things just being right. And one thing that the scientists call this is, they say we live in, they call it, is it the Cinderella or the Goldilocks zone?
Yeah, we're a Goldilocks planet.
Goldilocks. So that's what,
just right.
Everything is just right. That's why when they looking out for life elsewhere, they're looking for these Goldilocks places, which they haven't found, obviously, because God has created an absolute perfect situation for us to live in. Otherwise, we would never live. So that has to be such an amazing apologetic for God and the wonder of our universe.
That's stunning, isn't it?
Everything, and this is a scientific principle, not a Christian principle. Anthropic simply means like anthropology, isn't it? About man being at the center. It's a principle that a scientist only came up with like a few decades ago, but no one could ever disprove it because it's obviously right.
Yeah.
That's wonder in itself.
It really is.
Yeah,
it's amazing. It takes your breath away, this kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, there were a few things that readily came to mind when I was thinking about this topic this week. I'd like to, although we're 37 minutes in or so, I'd like to start with something and then end with something which I think sort of brings everything together. If it could be permitted, David. We've still got lots to talk about, but
what do you think, Steve? Shall we permit it?
No, I'm bored already.
Like somebody putting their hand up to go to the loo.
No,
you can't go now. You'll have to wait.
I'm going to talk about poetry now, Steve. So you might be.
Right.
So one of the things that brings wonder to me, and it definitely brings wonder to Steve, because he, like myself, he writes, is words. And words for me are cathartic, and like music and great art, can bring me wonder and joy and move me to tears. And so I've written down my favorite poem. It's by a man called A.E. Houseman, and the poem comes from one of his collections called A Shropshire Lad. And it's sort of very bittersweet, this poem. It's called Into My Heart, an Air That Kills. It's only two very short verses, but then I'll have some things to say about it. So this is the poem. Into my heart, an air that kills. From far country blows. What are those blue remembered hills? What spires What farms are those? That is the land of lost content. I see its shining plain, the happy highways where I went and cannot come again. And personally, for me, I find such savage beauty in those words. It tells us about loss, a sense of bereavement for something that he's not going to experience again because he's obviously aging. His life's going to be over. Life is fragile, so he's going to lose that. And when he's referring to these happy highways, from what I understand, Houseman was referring to a sort of utopian version of Britain's pastoral landscape. But I'm here in the Lake District this week, and it doesn't get more utopian than that.
Yeah, yeah.
And for me, what I have a sense of wonder of, and Steve, I would completely concur with what you said earlier about Jerusalem. 100%. And I've been to the Grand Canyon, as I've mentioned. I've been to the island of Capri, again, an astonishing place. But nothing compares to here. I'll be really honest. I may be getting very sentimental about this as I get older, but I would not want to live anywhere else. This, to me, is like the most beautiful country, this green and present land on the face of God's earth. I just find it astonishing. And one of the great things, and maybe one of the only few things perhaps about getting older, is it slows you down. So when I was younger, I used to do a lot of felt walking, a lot of mountain climbing. And the reason was always to get to the top.
Yeah.
To get from A to B as quickly as possible. That has completely changed in the last 10 years. Yeah. I now amble when I go for a walk. Yeah. I stroll. I'm taking in everything around me.
It's not the destination anymore. It's the journey.
Exactly, Dave.
And your legs wouldn't take you there anyway.
Well, probably not. But it's the cry of the oyster catcher, which, I mean, I've seen loads of oyster catchers because I've been doing some coastal walks this week. The cry of the oyster catchers on the beach, the shells that you found in there, the butterflies you're passing by. It's all of these things that I think speak obviously of God's incredible creation. And just breathing that in and taking that in, I think is something that just makes me feel alive. And that links into two other things. So first of all, where do I feel most alive? Well, I feel most alive in nature.
Yeah.
I think there's something extraordinary about it. It's something that just does something, not only for my physical health, but for my mental health as well. In fact, I've been saying to Joe, I really do think doctors should be prescribing everybody, at least a half an hour daily walk rather than giving them antidepressants.
Yeah.
There may be some people who've got a particular type of depression who do need antidepressants. And I wouldn't say that doctors should not use those. But I think if people, when I said, do you know what? The other thing that really struck me about this was, I think we spend too much time indoors. It absolutely bucketed down yesterday in the lakes. Monday and Tuesday were beautiful, but I still went out. I was strolling in the countryside. Yesterday I was on the mud flats at a place called Bardsea, which was actually potentially very dangerous, but I still loved it because I love the wild silence, solitude. So I think there's something about that. So there's something about nature that I think definitely draws us closer to God.
Yeah.
And there's something to do with walking. I think I've mentioned in one of my sword articles the phrase solvitur ambulando, which is a Latin phrase attributed to Saint Augustine, which means it is solved by walking. And
I think nice.
Walk, you start to reflect about your life. I often go for a prayer walk.
Yeah.
I tend to speak to God more when I'm walking than I do at any time.
I'm exactly the same. Walking is my number one activity. And I know in some cases it is because what the doctor says, 10,000 paces a day, that type of thing. But I'll do it anyway. Even if I didn't have my Apple Watch sort of monitoring me, I'd still go out and just walk. And we are fortunate that we have a little nature area, even in this part of London. I'm 5 minutes away from. It used to be a golf course, interestingly, called Fairlock Waters, and then COVID came, and it turned into a wilderness, and it's a wild wilderness, and it's wonderful. It's like going across the moors in Scotland or Yorkshire, and no one's bothered to do anything about it. They put some paths in now, but everything has grown really wild and unkempt, and that's the perfect environment for me. So I just wander around, and I could be in there, 5-10 minutes, and walk around the lake. I've got my own little park bench I'll sit on, and that's where that's where God gives me most of my ideas.
Yeah,
on these walks, just away from the noise.
Well, you two are making me want to sing at the top of my voice Jerusalem or something.
Oh, go on then.
I don't think I'm going to go there, but
that links everything together, David. Really
it does,
well.
doesn't it? Yeah, it's amazing. I tell you what, though,
in ancient times,
what you say about poetry, I mean, I have a real appreciation of poetry, and in the spirit of Eric Morecambe, a boy stood on a bridge one night. His lips were all a quiver. He gave a cough. His leg came off and floated down the river.
That's dragged it down.
And there was another one here, actually, which leads me into something else, which I do find as a sense of awe for. And it's nothing much as rustic and rural and all those things that you've been talking about. But here's one, another bit of it. It says, the boy stood on the burning deck playing a game of cricket. The ball rolled up his trouser leg and stumped his middle wicket.
Getting worse.
Well, the reason I say that
why's David Jones pulling his hair out?
No, the reason I say that is that one of the things that I absolutely love is watching a fast bowler when he takes out the middle wicket of the batsman, and the stump flies for about 10 yards behind the batsman, and there is this roar from the crowd, and it's wow. That's I mean, I love cricket, but I mean I think that is just one of the
that's what you were talking
awesome
about.
Things in cricket.
Okay, so that was the middle wicket you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
For those new to the podcast, you'll get used to David Shepherd talking at least once during each and every episode about cricket.
Well, I've got to bring it back to reality, haven't I? I mean, that they wear white when they're playing Test cricket
because they think they're in heaven.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's the only thing that they'll be wearing. It's the only sport in heaven. Maybe. Well,
I'm
maybe tennis.
Let me bring you both back to nature now.
Oh, right.
Show you how wonderful our country is and how wondrous.
We're going back from.
I'm going to quiz you.
We're going back from the ridiculous to the sublime now.
Absolutely right. So there are 15 national parks in the UK. Can you name them?
15
Lake District.
The Brecons.
2, well done.
Snowdonia.
3. Or for our Welsh listeners, Eryri.
Oh yes, yeah.
The Downs, South Downs.
Well done, Steve. That one that had escaped me.
The Yorkshire
North Downs.
Yorkshire Dales.
No, not the North Downs. No, Yorkshire Dales. There's 2 in Yorkshire. What's the other one?
The Derbyshire.
Peak District. The
Peak District. Yes. Lake District.
Cotswolds.
Do we ever say the Lake District?
Not the Cotswolds, Steve. Surprisingly, no.
The Chilterns.
Not the Chilterns either.
Must be something down in Cornwall somewhere.
Are we talking about Scotland as well, or are we just talking about England?
Scotland as well. So down in Devon and Cornwall, we've got
Bodmin.
Oh, Exmoor,
and
Dartmoor.
And Dartmoor.
Oh, Dartmoor, yeah.
And then over on the east coast.
The Fens.
Well, yeah, more or less, Steve. Yeah, so the Broad, which covers Norfolk and Suffolk.
How many is that? That must be about 12.
Yeah, so the ones you haven't got in England are the New Forest and Northumbria.
Yeah.
And then in Wales, you mentioned the Brecons, we've got, and Snowdonia, and the Pembrokeshire coast is the other one there.
Wow. Yeah.
And then there's 2 in Scotland. Do we know the 2 in Scotland?
Loch Lomond.
Well done, Steve. Loch Lomond and the Trossachs.
Trossachs.
And the other one, which is actually larger than Luxembourg.
Ben Nevis, sort of that area. So
yeah, the Cairngorms.
Cairngorms, yeah.
So we've got 15 national parks. So and you'll have a national park close to you wherever you live. So I would urge people listening just to get outside and explore our beautiful countryside. and see how wonderful it truly is. The only place they haven't got is in Northern Ireland. But they, I mean, obviously they've got fantastic, outstanding places of natural beauty in Northern Ireland, like the Giant's Causeway, which if you've not been to, I would recommend everybody to pay a visit. But they are talking about maybe creating one around the Mountains of Mourne.
Wow, that sounds good. I tell you what, in conclusion, it seems to me that we ought to be in one of these national parks, drinking coffee,
playing cricket,
eating fresh bread, looking up at the stars and quoting Houseman.
And your wife and the wife has to be with you.
And the wife has to be with you, and you need to be thinking about Jerusalem.
Yeah.
There you go. Look.
But David, there was something you didn't do today, which you always do every week.
What's that?
You didn't do a definition.
A definition of wonder. Go on then. You've got one, I bet.
So it's a feeling of amazement caused by something beautiful, remarkable, or unfamiliar.
Yep.
But the second definition is the way I'd like us to end, because I think this is absolutely crucial for people to hear who listen to us. So the second definition is a feeling of reverential respect, tinged perhaps with fear. And they give us a sense of that. They were both awed by the vastness of the forest. So I started talking about Houseman there. Yeah. I want to end by talking about the thing that I think is the most wondrous thing on the face of this earth. And that's the wonder of the cross and the resurrection. And Amen. There's a guy called Robin Mark, worship leader.
Yep.
Who wrote a song about this. And he says the following. This is when Jesus was laying in the tomb. And this is the lyrics from the song. Were heaven's praises silent in those hours of darkness? Was your Holy Spirit brooding round that empty throne? Until the declaration, he is risen. He is not dead. Behold, he lives forevermore.
Yeah, brilliant. Amen. Yeah, I just I don't know why, but it just made me think of the women going to the tomb.
Yeah,
on discovering that the stone had been rolled back, and then meeting the Lord in the garden and actually thinking he was a gardener, but the awe that they must have had at that moment because of his resurrection. Stunning, eh?
Yeah, absolutely.
I tell you what. You know, I mean, we've covered an awful lot today, haven't we? And what I was thinking is when Steve gets his little telescope and looks up at Mars, is he going to see fudge there? And because that would be a real wonder, wouldn't it?
Well, the only fudge I'm likely to see is a bit of smudge on the lens. So, my grandson. Yeah.
Thank you very much for listening to Is the Fudge on Mars and listening to our ramblings today. We appreciate it. We do appreciate it when you put comments on our website, which is saltshakers.com. And I think you can also find the book that Steve mentioned, which is, what was the one we talked about earlier?
I remember.
So the truth is out there.
Truth is out there.
Yeah, on our Salt Shakers website.
So go to Salt Shakers website, put some comments down, tell us what makes you respond in awe and wonder in the world. And we will catch you next time. So this is Steve Maltz, David Jones, and myself, David Shepherd, saying goodbye for now. Goodbye, guys.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
And we will catch you next time. Bye for now.
Bye.